I'm Bridget Carter, 38, and I'd spent weeks planning this night at a swanky Boston restaurant, hoping to finally earn a nod of respect. I'd made it big in tech, built an app that sold for millions, yet my family never saw me as enough. That night, I surprised them with first-class tickets to Hawaii, thinking it would bridge the gap. My sister smirked, tossing her ticket onto the table. "You're still trying to buy our love, aren't you?" she said, her voice dripping with scorn. My dad leaned back, chuckling. "No one here actually likes you," he added, loud enough for nearby tables to turn. My mom just stared at her plate, silent as always. The words cut deep, but I didn't flinch. I smiled, nodded, and said, "Understood." Then I walked out, their laughter echoing behind me. In the parking lot, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "Good luck buying respect." That was the moment I decided they'd regret those words. A few weeks later, my phone was flooded with calls from them begging me to stop, but it was already too late. What about you? If you were in my shoes, would you forgive them or let them face the consequences? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know. Growing up in our Cape Cod home, I was always the shadow. My sister Wendy, 3 years older, was the star. Vibrant, confident, the daughter my parents adored. I was Bridget, the quiet one, fading into the corners. The salty ocean breeze would drift through our open windows, carrying the sound of waves crashing nearby. But inside, the air felt heavy with favoritism. My dad would light up at her report cards, her soccer trophies, her bold laugh. "That's my girl," he'd say, his voice warm, his eyes sparkling like the sunlight on the bay. For me, he'd sigh, his broad shoulders slumping as if my very presence exhausted him. "You're too shy, Bridget," he'd mutter, as if silence was a defect. My mom stayed quiet, her eyes on her book, letting his words settle over me like a fog rolling in from the sea. I learned early to keep my hopes small, to hide my spark so they wouldn't dim it. My heart would ache, a dull throb in my chest. As I retreated to my room, the wooden floor creaking under my feet, wondering why I wasn't enough. When I was 10, I built a model rocket for a science fair, spending nights perfecting every detail under the glow of my desk lamp, the smell of glue and paint filling my small bedroom. It launched higher than any other, earning first place. I ran home clutching my ribbon, the blue fabric soft against my sweaty palms, my sneakers pounding the pavement, expecting a smile, maybe even a hug. At dinner, the aroma of roasted chicken wafting from the kitchen, my dad didn't look up from his plate. "Wendy's speech won her a scholarship," he said, passing the bread with a proud grin. Wendy grinned back, her perfect teeth flashing. "Some people just aren't built for attention," she teased, her tone light but laced with superiority. My throat tightened like a knot I couldn't swallow, but I nodded, forcing down my pride along with the meal. That night, alone in my bed, the moonlight filtering through the curtains, I promised myself I'd show them one day. Not with words, but with something undeniable. The sting of their dismissal burned in my chest, fueling a quiet fire I kept hidden. High school was the same story, a relentless loop of neglect that chipped away at my confidence. Wendy led the debate team, her charisma filling our house like the scent of fresh-baked cookies my mom made for her victories. I'd hear her practicing speeches in the living room, her voice confident and commanding, while I found escape in the computer lab at school. The hum of old machines a soothing backdrop as I taught myself to code on clunky keyboards, my fingers flying across the keys in the dim fluorescent light. My dad called it messing around, dismissing it with a wave of his hand over dinner, the clink of forks underscoring his indifference. "It won't lead anywhere," he'd say, his tone final. My mom would ask if I was keeping up my grades, her voice mild, but never probing deeper. I coded anyway, late into the night, the blue glow of the screen illuminating my face, building apps, calendars, to-do lists that felt like my own world, a sanctuary where I controlled everything. Each line of code was a small rebellion, my heart pounding with excitement as programs came to life, but I buried that joy, fearing their mockery. By college, I was selling small apps, earning enough to pay my tuition without asking for help. The checks arrived in plain envelopes, crisp and empowering, but when I mentioned it at home, the response was tepid. "Wendy studied marketing, a real path," my dad said, clapping her on the back with that same warm pride, the sound echoing in our cozy kitchen. I got a nod and a "don't overwork yourself," his words clipped like an afterthought. At 23, I launched my first big app, a task manager that exploded online, downloads pouring in like a digital tidal wave. A tech giant bought it for $8 million the moment I felt like I'd finally broken free. I called home, my voice shaky with excitement, my hands trembling on the phone, hoping they'd finally see me, the woman I'd become. "That's nice," my dad said flatly, then pivoted to Wendy's new role at a top ad firm, his enthusiasm reserved for her. My mom mailed a card. No signature, just blank inside, arriving in my mailbox like a hollow echo. Wendy didn't bother replying at all. I thought the money would shift their view, make them notice me beyond the shy girl they remembered. It didn't. Their indifference hit like a cold wave crashing on the Cape Cod shore, leaving me chilled to the bone. They still saw the shy girl, not the one who'd built an empire from nothing. I moved to Boston, founded a tech startup, and launched another app, a productivity tool downloaded by millions. My name appeared in industry articles, glossy pages praising my innovation, and I spoke at tech summits, the spotlight warm on my skin, applause thundering in packed auditoriums. Strangers admired my work, shaking my hand with genuine respect, but my family never asked about it. At Christmas dinners back in Cape Cod, the house smelling of pine and turkey, my dad quizzed Wendy about her ad campaigns, her corner office, his eyes lighting up as she boasted. My mom nodded along, refilling glasses with mulled wine, her movements mechanical. I sat there, my achievements buried under their chatter, my fork idly pushing food around my plate, the festive lights blurring through unshed tears. Once I mentioned a national tech award, the heavy trophy still in my bag from the ceremony. Wendy laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "What for, geek stuff?" My dad chuckled, deep and dismissive, and my mom looked away, out the window at the snowy yard. I stopped trying to share, the rejection settling like lead in my stomach, each slight stacking up like unread notifications. The years stacked up, and so did their slights. Every visit home was a reminder. Wendy's life was the spotlight, mine an afterthought. Each milestone, a new app, a million users, was a quiet defiance against their doubts, but deep down, I still craved their approval, a sign they saw me. That longing gnawed at me, a persistent ache, like a bruise that never healed. That's why I planned that grand gesture, those first-class tickets to Hawaii. I thought something big might finally make them look at me differently, bridge the chasm with luxury and generosity. That night at the Boston restaurant changed everything. I'd reserved a corner table at a harborside steakhouse, its velvet curtains swaying gently, gleaming chandeliers casting a golden glow over the polished tables. The scent of seared steak and ocean salt mingled in the air, soft jazz playing in the background. For weeks, I'd poured my heart into planning this dinner, believing a grand gesture might finally win their respect. I'd spent $100,000 on first-class tickets to Hawaii, one for each of them, nestled in embossed envelopes that felt smooth and heavy in my hands. I pictured my dad's rare nod of approval. Maybe a, "You've made it, Bridget," his voice gruff but sincere. I imagined Wendy's usual smirk softening, my mom finally speaking up with pride, her quiet demeanor cracking with emotion. My hope was a fragile thread, thin as spider silk, but I clung to it, my pulse quickening as we sat down. As the waiter set down plates of seared steak, steam rising in curls, I slid the envelopes across the table, the linen cloth whispering under them. "A surprise for you all," I said, my voice steady despite the flutter in my chest, like butterflies trapped inside. Wendy, always quick, tore hers open, her manicured nails flashing, her eyes flicking over the ticket. Her lips curled into a sneer, distorting her pretty features. "You're still trying to buy our love, aren't you?" she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the room's soft jazz like a knife slicing the air. She tossed the ticket onto her untouched bread plate, the paper crinkling loudly, a sound that seemed to echo. My dad leaned back, his chuckle harsh and deliberate, rumbling from his chest like thunder. "No one here actually likes you," he said, his words booming, drawing stares from a couple at the next table, their forks pausing mid-air. A server paused mid-step, her tray wobbling slightly. My mom twisted her napkin into a knot, her knuckles white, her eyes fixed on it, not a single word in my defense. Her silence stung worse than their mockery, a knife twisting in my gut, deeper than any verbal barb. I sat there, my hands trembling, under the table, my face burning with heat, as if the chandeliers had focused their light on me alone. Their words weren't new, but in that moment they felt heavier, sharper, like every slight from my childhood had crashed into this one night. The ignored rocket, the dismissed coding, the overlooked millions. I'd spent years building a tech empire, hoping they'd see me. My fingers calloused from keyboards, my nights sleepless with ambition. I'd poured my heart into this dinner, into those tickets, thinking it might bridge the gap. The aroma of garlic butter and wine now turning my stomach. Wendy's sneer grew wider, her fork tapping the table rhythmically, impatiently, as she waited. For my reaction, her eyes gleaming with cruel anticipation. My dad sipped his wine, the glass clinking against his teeth, his eyes glinting with amusement as if my pain was a game, a sport to enjoy over dinner. My mom's silence screamed louder than their words, her refusal to meet my gaze a betrayal I couldn't unsee, her downcast eyes like a final abandonment. The room felt suffocating, the clink of glasses and murmurs of other diners fading into a dull roar in my ears, my heartbeat thundering like a storm. I forced a smile, my lips tight, pulling against the urge to shatter. "Understood," I said, my voice calm but cold as ice, slicing through the tension. I stood, my chair scraping the polished floor, the sound cutting through their laughter like a gunshot. Every eye in the room seemed to follow me as I walked out, my heels clicking against the hardwood, each step a declaration. The harbor's salty, breeze hit my face outside, cooling my flushed skin, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. I didn't look back. I'd spent my life chasing their approval, bending over backward to prove I was enough, my back aching from the effort. That night, something snapped inside me, a brittle branch breaking under too much weight. I wasn't the quiet girl they could dismiss anymore. I was done. The next morning, I sat in my Boston condo, the skyline glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows like a promise of power, a steaming coffee mug warming my hands. The events of the night replayed in my mind, each word a fresh wound, but now mixed with resolve. I made the call I'd been contemplating since I walked out of that restaurant, my fingers steady on the phone. My lawyer answered on the first ring, his voice professional and crisp. "Sell the Cape Cod house," I told him, my voice steady, no tremor betraying the storm inside. "Start tonight." It was my inheritance from my grandfather, the only thing I fully controlled. The deed in my name alone, a gift he'd given me knowing my family's blindness. By morning, a developer had offered $2 million cash. No questions, the deal sealed with a digital signature, the locks changed remotely. I felt a weight lift for the first time in years, like shedding a heavy coat in spring, the air lighter around me. 3 days later, my dad called, his voice shaking with rage, crackling through the speaker. "What the hell did you do, Bridget?" he shouted, his words exploding like fireworks. "That house was our family's legacy, and you sold it like a selfish brat." I held the phone away, his words echoing the same dismissal I'd heard all my life, but now they bounced off me like rain on glass. I didn't respond, just hung up, the click satisfying, final. Wendy's text came next, her words dripping with venom, lighting up my screen. "You betrayed the family selling Grandpa's house like that." I deleted it without replying, my thumb swiping with deliberate calm. They thought they could guilt me into backing down, their messages piling up like unwanted mail, but I was done being their punching bag, my bruises finally healing. The next morning, my mom showed up at my door, her coat buttoned tightly against the autumn chill, leaves crunching under her shoes as she approached. She sat on my couch, clutching her purse like a shield, her eyes avoiding mine, darting to the modern art on my walls. "We're hurt, Bridget," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, the scent of her familiar perfume, lavender and vanilla filling the room. "Why didn't you talk to us first?" Her tone was gentle, but there was no apology, no acknowledgement of the years she'd let me drown in their neglect, her silence a complicit wave pulling me under. I waited for something more, a hint of regret. My breath held, but she just sighed and left, the door clicking shut behind her, leaving a hollow echo. Her visit stung, not because she came, but because she still wouldn't stand up for me, her inaction a deeper cut than words. I needed someone who saw me, truly saw the fire I'd hidden. So I turned to my boyfriend, Eric, a tech colleague who'd always understood my drive, his quiet strength a balm. We met at a quiet cafe near my office, the hum of espresso machines filling the silence, the rich aroma of coffee grounding me. I told him everything. The dinner, the tickets, the way my family tore me down, my voice cracking as I relived the humiliation, tears pricking my eyes. Eric listened, his eyes steady, never interrupting, his hand reaching across the table to steady mine. When I finished, he leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "You've been carrying them financially for years, haven't you?" he said, his voice low and knowing. I nodded, thinking of the family trust I'd funded for emergencies, college for Wendy's, kids, medical bills for my parents, the money flowing out like water from a faucet I'd left on. "It's time to cut them off," he said firmly, his grip tightening. "They don't deserve you." Eric's words hit hard, but they made sense, resonating in my chest like a truth long buried. Then he leaned closer, his voice low, conspiratorial. "Have you checked the trust lately?" he asked. "Wendy's been spending a lot, new car, vacations. It's worth looking into." I froze, my mind racing, the cafe's chatter fading as alarm bells rang in my head. I'd set up the trust years ago, pouring in millions from my app sales, trusting Wendy to manage it fairly, her marketing savvy seeming like a safe bet. The idea that she might be misusing it felt like another betrayal, a punch to the gut, but it wasn't a surprise. Her entitlement had always simmered beneath the surface. Eric offered to pull the financial records, his tech skills perfect for digging into the details, his fingers already itching for the keyboard. "Let's find out what's really going on," he said, squeezing my hand, his touch warm and reassuring. I left the cafe with a new clarity, the autumn sun filtering through the leaves overhead, casting dappled shadows on the sidewalk. Selling the house was just the start. My family thought they could keep me in their shadow, but I was ready to step into my own light, the path ahead illuminated. Eric's support gave me the strength to face what came next, whatever the trust revealed, my resolve hardening like steel. 2 weeks later, Eric found something I couldn't believe. We sat in his Cambridge apartment, the hum of his laptop filling the silence, the screen's glow casting blue light on our faces as he pulled up financial records for the family trust. I'd poured millions into it over the years, thinking it would secure my parents' retirement and Wendy's kids' future, each deposit a quiet act of love. Eric's tech skills uncovered a trail of transactions that made my stomach turn, numbers scrolling like accusations. Wendy had siphoned off $500,000, funneling it into a startup that crashed within months. The project, some flashy app promising instant fame, was her pet idea, pitched to her ad firm's investors but rejected, her ambition blinding her. She'd used my money to fund her gamble, leaving the trust nearly drained, the balance a pitiful shadow of what I'd built. I stared at the screen, my hands clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms. "She didn't even ask," I whispered, my voice breaking, betrayal flooding me like ice water. Eric nodded, his jaw tight, anger mirroring mine. "She thought you'd never notice," he said, his tone edged with disgust. The betrayal stung, but it wasn't a surprise. Wendy had always acted entitled, as if my success was hers to claim, her smirks now revealed as masks for greed. I'd trusted her to manage the trust, believing her marketing background meant she knew better. But now I saw her for what she was, an opportunist who'd exploited my generosity, her actions a web of deceit. I made a decision on the spot, my mind snapping into focus. "I'm done," I told Eric, my voice firm, no room for doubt. He squeezed my shoulder, his touch solid. "Let's make it official." I called my lawyer the next day, the phone cool against my ear, instructing her to transfer the remaining trust balance, barely $1 million, to a Massachusetts charity for foster children. It felt right. Redirecting my money to kids who needed it, not a sister who'd squandered it. Each signature a step toward freedom. The paperwork was finalized in a week, every cent legally moved, the process swift and irreversible. I didn't tell. My family, they'd find out soon enough, the surprise a mirror to their own shocks. Word of Wendy's financial missteps spread fast, like wildfire through dry grass. A Boston business journal ran a story hinting at an investigation into her firm's dealings, the headlines bold and unforgiving. Her startup failure was public now, her name tied to reckless investments, colleagues whispering about her over lunches, their voices hushed but damning. Her reputation in the ad world crumbling piece by piece like a sandcastle at high tide. I didn't start the investigation, but I didn't stop it either. She'd built her castle on my money, and now it was collapsing, the ruins satisfying in their inevitability. I felt no guilt, only a grim satisfaction, a quiet nod to justice. She'd mocked me for years, called me a traitor for selling the Cape Cod house. This was her reckoning, earned through her own hands. My dad called a week later, his voice laced with anger, sputtering through the line. "You're tearing this family apart, Bridget," he said. "First the house, now this charity nonsense. You're punishing us for nothing." I let the call go to voicemail, his words fading into static, a distant buzz. I'd spent my life seeking his approval, but his accusations no longer held weight, slipping off me like water. I deleted the message, my heart lighter than it had been in years, unburdened. My mom didn't call, her silence a familiar ache, but I was done chasing her validation, the pursuit exhausting no more. Wendy sent no messages, likely too busy scrambling to save her career, her empire cracking under scrutiny. Eric and I met at my condo that evening, papers spread across the dining table like a battle map, the city lights twinkling outside. We started mapping out my financial future, determined to protect what I'd built, pen scratching as we plotted. My apps had generated $8 million over the years, but I'd been careless, letting family obligations drain me like a leaking faucet. Eric suggested a new trust, one I'd control entirely, with no access for Wendy or my parents, his voice steady. "Lock it down," he said, his pen circling figures with precision. "Offshore accounts, private investments, keep it out of their reach." I nodded, his pragmatism grounding me, each plan a brick in my fortress. We spent hours brainstorming, sketching out plans to diversify my assets. Real estate in Boston, tech stocks, a small venture fund for local startups. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, my shoulders straightening with every idea. I wasn't just cutting ties with my family. I was building a fortress around my future, impenetrable. Eric's support was unwavering, his belief in me a stark contrast to the family who dismissed me, his eyes meeting mine with genuine pride. As we worked, I realized I'd spent years proving my worth to the wrong people, the epiphany washing over me like dawnlight. The trust transfer, Wendy's downfall, my dad's futile rage, it all confirmed what I'd known since that dinner. I didn't need their approval. I had my own, solid and unshakable. Fall brought more trouble than I expected, the leaves turning crimson like warnings. My dad hired a lawyer to sue me over the Cape Cod house, claiming I'd stolen a family asset, the lawsuit landing on my desk in a thick envelope, heavy with desperation. It accused me of breaching some vague familial duty, words twisted like vines. I wasn't worried. My grandfather's will, ironclad and notarized, named me as the sole owner. No ambiguity. I met my lawyer in her downtown Boston office, the city's skyline sharp against the crisp autumn sky, traffic humming below. She flipped through the documents, her pen tapping rhythmically. "This is baseless," she said, her tone confident. "The house was yours to sell." The case dragged on for weeks, hearings in sterile courtrooms, but the judge dismissed it in a single hearing, gavel striking like finality. My dad's lawyer had no evidence, just bluster, empty as wind. I walked out of the courthouse, the weight of their desperation lifting with each step, the cool air filling my lungs. Then came Wendy's next move, a desperate lash. I was scrolling through my phone one evening, the screen's glow the only light in my dim condo, when I saw her post on a public Boston community page. "Bridget Carter, the greedy sister who sold our family's legacy for profit," it read, painting me as a con artist who'd swindled our inheritance for personal gain. She'd tagged mutual acquaintances, ensuring the post spread like wildfire, notifications pinging relentlessly. By morning, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years sent hesitant messages, asking if it was true, their words tentative. Aunts and uncles stopped calling altogether, their silence louder than Wendy's lies, a void that echoed. The accusations stung, each word a reminder of the family I'd tried to please for decades, my chest tightening with old pain. But I didn't respond. I'd learned long ago that fighting her noise with mine would only fuel her fire, giving her the attention she craved. The financial investigation into Wendy, already underway, gained traction, accelerating like a train. Eric's contacts in the tech world had tipped off a local auditor who dug deeper into the family trust's records, spreadsheets revealing layers of deceit. They found more than the $500,000 Wendy had funneled into her failed startup. She'd also diverted funds to cover personal expenses, luxury handbags, a leased BMW, even a vacation home rental in Nantucket. receipts like breadcrumbs of betrayal. The evidence was damning, and a formal inquiry was launched by the state's Financial Oversight Board, papers stamped with official seals. Articles in Boston's business blogs began naming her, questioning her ethics in bold print, her face splashed across screens. Her ad firm issued a statement distancing itself, cold and corporate, and whispers of her resignation circulated like rumors in a crowded room. Wendy's carefully curated image as a savvy businesswoman was unraveling, thread by thread, and I didn't lift a finger to stop it. It was her own doing, unfolding naturally. The extended family started asking questions, the cracks spreading. My cousin Laura called, her voice uneasy over the line. "Is it true about Wendy's spending?" she asked, hesitation in every syllable. I kept my answers short, letting the truth speak for itself, no embellishment needed. Soon, aunts, uncles, and distant relatives began eyeing my dad and Wendy with suspicion, sidelong glances at gatherings. Family gatherings, once dominated by their charm, grew tense, conversations halting, the air thick with unspoken accusations. My mom stayed silent as always, but I heard from Laura that she'd stopped defending Wendy at reunions, her quiet a shift. The family's unity, fragile to begin with, cracked under the weight of Wendy's deceit, fissures widening. I felt no satisfaction, only a dull ache for the bonds I'd once hoped to mend, a bittersweet twinge in my heart. The pain of Wendy's lies lingered, but I refused to engage, my energy preserved. I met Eric at a harborside cafe, the water glinting under the late September sun, waves lapping gently against the dock. "She wants you to fight back," he said, stirring his coffee, the spoon clinking softly. "Don't give her the stage." His advice grounded me as always, an anchor in the storm. Instead of posting rebuttals or calling cousins to explain, I focused on my next steps, channeling the turmoil into action. My tech company was thriving, new contracts pouring in like rain, emails flooding my inbox. I'd started a foundation to fund STEM education for local kids, the mission igniting a passion I'd long suppressed. Wendy's rumors couldn't touch that. I was building something real, something mine, brick by brick. As we left the cafe, the breeze ruffling my hair, I felt lighter, the noise of her accusations fading against the strength I'd found within myself, a quiet roar building inside. One winter evening, an email changed my perspective, arriving like a ghost from the past. It came from my grandfather William's lawyer, a name I hadn't heard since settling his estate years ago, the subject line simple but intriguing. Attached was a scanned letter, written in his familiar slanted handwriting, dated weeks before his death, ink faded but words sharp. "Bridget," it began, "you've always had a fire in you. Don't let anyone dim it. Live for your values, not their expectations." He wrote of his pride in my drive, my independence, things my family never acknowledged. His praise warming me like sunlight through clouds. He urged me to carve my own path, to let go of those who couldn't see my worth, each sentence a lifeline. I sat at my desk, snow falling softly outside my Boston condo, a white blanket over the city, tears blurring the words on the screen, hot tracks down my cheeks. William had seen me when no one else did, his insight piercing the veil. His words felt like a hand reaching through time, steadying me. The paper's texture almost tangible in my mind. Wendy's world was collapsing. The investigation now public, exposing her misuse of over $500,000 from the family trust. Her failed startup was just the start. Auditors found payments for personal luxuries, designer clothes, a yacht rental for a client party. Extravagances piled like evidence. Her ad firm dropped her, major clients canceling contracts citing breached trust, doors slamming shut. A local news outlet ran a story on her downfall, linking her false social media claims about me to her financial misconduct, headlines blaring. Her reputation in Boston's business scene, once her pride, lay in ruins, shattered glass she couldn't reassemble. I didn't reach out. She'd built her empire on lies, and I watched it crumble from afar, feeling neither joy nor regret, only closure, a door finally shutting. My parents faced their own reckoning, the fallout spreading. The failed lawsuit over the Cape Cod house cost them thousands in legal fees, draining their savings like a sieve, their bank statements bleeding red. My dad's insistence on the suit, fueled by pride, backfired when cousins and aunts learned of his and Wendy's attempts to undermine me, whispers turning to outright disdain. Family gatherings grew cold toward them, relatives whispering about their greed behind cupped hands. My mom, always silent, lost the respect of her siblings, who saw her inaction as complicity, her quiet a betrayal. Their social standing, once a source of pride, faded as the extended family rallied around the truth, alliances shifting. I heard from a cousin that they'd taken out a loan to cover expenses, their lifestyle no longer sustainable, the facade cracking. I felt a pang of sadness, a fleeting shadow, but it passed. Their choices weren't mine to carry. A burden lifted. I'd started therapy that fall, meeting weekly with a counselor in a cozy Back Bay office, the room scented with chamomile tea, soft cushions inviting vulnerability. At first, I went to process the pain of Wendy's betrayal and my parents' rejection, words tumbling out in sessions. But over time, I unraveled deeper truths, layers peeling like an onion. I'd spent decades chasing their approval, tying my worth to their validation, a rope that chafed. Session by session, I saw how their dismissal reflected their own flaws, not mine, mirrors cracked by their insecurities. My therapist's words stuck with me. You don't need their light to shine. I began to let go, not of them, but of the need to prove myself to them. The release like exhaling a long-held breath. My $8 million in assets, my tech empire, my foundation. For kids, they were mine, built without their praise, standing tall. William's letter sealed that truth, a capstone on my journey. One snowy evening, Eric took me to a small cafe in the North End, its windows glowing with string lights, snowflakes dancing outside like confetti. We'd spent months planning my financial future, securing my wealth in untouchable trusts and investments. Spreadsheets our blueprint. That night felt different, though. He was quieter, his hand fidgeting in his pocket, a nervous energy humming. As we sat by the window, the cold glass fogging with our breath, he slid a small box across the table, velvet soft. "Bridget," he said, his voice soft but steady, eyes locking on mine. "You're my home. Will you marry me?" My heart raced, not from fear, but from a joy I hadn't known I could feel, bubbling up like champagne. I said, "Yes," my voice breaking, tears of happiness welling, and he slipped a simple diamond ring onto my finger, the metal cool and perfect. The cafe's patrons clapped, their smiles warm, a stark contrast to the coldness of my family's dinner table, applause filling the air like music. For the first time, I felt truly seen, not for my achievements, but for who I was, whole and valued. That moment marked a new beginning, fresh as the snow outside. William's words echoed in my mind as I looked at Eric, his eyes bright with love, a future unfolding. I was done living for others' expectations, the chains broken. My family's downfall. Their financial and social ruin was their own making, a house of cards toppled by wind they stirred. I'd built a life that honored my values: strength, integrity, and purpose. As we left the cafe hand in hand, the weight of my past felt lighter than ever, footsteps light in the snow. I was ready for what came next, not as their daughter or sister, but as Bridget, whole and free. 1 year after that dinner, I stood in a white dress, the small Boston church glowing with candlelight, its wooden pews filled with friends and colleagues who'd become my chosen family, their faces beaming. Eric waited at the altar, his smile steady, grounding me as I walked down the aisle, the organ music swelling softly, my veil whispering. My dad, my mom, and Wendy weren't there. I hadn't invited them, the decision calm. The absence didn't ache as it once might have. I'd made peace with their silence, a void filled with better things. Their absence a choice I no longer questioned. Final. The ceremony was simple, filled with laughter and vows that felt like promises to myself as much as to Eric, words woven with sincerity. As we exchanged rings, the metal warm from our hands, I felt a quiet strength, a certainty that this was where I belonged, my heart full. My parents had faded from my life, ghosts in the rear view. I heard through a cousin that my dad and mom were struggling, their finances crumbling under the weight of loans taken to cover the failed lawsuit, bills piling like snowdrifts. The extended family, once loyal to them, had turned away. their trust eroded by the truth of my dad's and Wendy's actions. Bridges burned. Holiday gatherings no longer included them, relatives choosing distance over drama, invitations ceasing. I didn't reach out. Their world, built on pride and control, had collapsed, and I no longer felt the need to fix it, the responsibility shed. My mom's silence, once a wound, was now just a fact, like the winter chill outside the church, cold but irrelevant. Wendy's fall was complete, the climax of her hubris. The legal fallout from her financial misconduct led to a formal charge of embezzlement, tied to the $500,000 she'd misused from the family trust. Courtroom's her new stage. Her firm's collapse left her without clients, her name blacklisted in Boston's business circles, doors slamming forever. A court ordered her to repay what she could, but her savings were gone, spent on failed ventures and lavish purchases, empty accounts her legacy. She tried to rebuild her image with public apologies, posts pleading for forgiveness, but the damage was done, irreparable. Her lies about me exposed as desperation only deepened her isolation, a pariah in her own world. I read about her in a news brief, her face a ghost of the confident sister I'd once known, lines etched by consequences. I felt no urge to confront her. Her consequences were her own, self-inflicted. I'd poured my energy into something new, a foundation named after my grandfather William, dedicated to helping young women in Massachusetts launch tech startups. The William Carter Fund had already awarded $1 million in grants, supporting coders and entrepreneurs who reminded me of my younger self, their dreams vivid. At the foundation's first gala, held in a Boston hotel ballroom, chandeliers sparkling. Overhead, I watched a 20-year-old pitch her app to investors, her eyes bright with ambition, voice steady. I saw William's legacy in her, not in the house I'd sold or the family I'd left behind, but in the spark of creation. The work filled me with purpose, a reminder that my worth wasn't tied to those who dismissed me, but to what I built. Through it all, I'd learned a truth that changed everything. Self-respect is living for yourself, not for anyone's approval. My family's rejection, their accusations, their lies, they were mirrors of their own failures, not mine. I'd spent years trying to prove I was enough, but I didn't need their validation to know it. My success, my company, my foundation, my marriage, they were mine, built on my terms. Therapy had helped me see that, and William's letter had sealed it. I carried that lesson with me, a quiet mantra that guided every step, empowering. Eric and I left the church hand in hand, stepping into the crisp evening air, stars twinkling above. Our new life stretched before us, free from the shadows of my past. I'd cut ties with my family completely, not out of anger, but out of clarity. They'd chosen their path, and I'd chosen